Well, let's move forward here. Today was the first day of first set of hearings, so to speak, at the International Court of Justice around South Africa's submission there, charging Israel with genocide. South Africa presented their case here today, January 11th. Israel will make some sort of response tomorrow, and then the process will continue moving forward. But to discuss all this and more, are very honored to be joined by Lamis Deek, who's an international attorney with Deek, Dichter, and Adi, and also with the Palestine Assembly for Liberation Commission on War Crimes. Lamis, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's an honor with both of you, Eugene and Rania, to see you direct on screen. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your magnificent work. I don't know if my internet connection is doing well, but you'll let me know. It's telling me here it's not stable, but we'll do our best. This is a really critical time and day, and I'm glad that you're giving it the time and gravity it really deserves. And I think it's a critical moment, not just in Palestinian history, which it really is, but in world history. And so I'm happy to be here with you to talk a little bit about this and to hear from you as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. We can hear you loud and clear now, but we will let you know if anything changes. But I mean, one thing that I was hoping to ask you first is maybe it seems obvious, but why is South Africa's case here at the International Court of Justice so important? What does it? What can it accomplish?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the bigger picture, this is really a question of, or rather a test of the laws, the rule of law, and the systems and mechanisms that are intended to execute the laws, which are designed not just to protect human rights, but really to physically preserve humanity, its very self. So we're talking about the very right to exist as a people, as a part of humanity, is being tested. The mechanisms designed to make sure that this is of utmost importance to every state are being tested at the moment. So that's the big picture. And the question becomes, direct result of the ICJ finding is, are these laws and systems null, void, and racist, such that we have ushered in an era into abject barbarism, or can they be salvaged? And really, this is a monumentous test of this, a momentous test of this. On the Palestinian level, what this means is actually quite of the same magnitude, and it's never happened in the history of Palestine, which is number one. Looking at actually the overview, what is being requested. Today's argument was on the provisional measures and not necessarily the merits. And the provisional measures are asking that the ICJ order measures which will prevent and punish those who have engaged in genocide in Palestine. This is huge. First of all, what does that mean to say to prevent? This could then go to the UN Security Council, and I'll talk about the US, to authorize direct military action to stop Israel from continuing its genocide in Gaza, right? I understand that there's the question of the UNSC, the UN Security Council veto by the US, but this, as pursuant to several meetings we've had with governments, representing their government, with missions to the UN, this has been under discussion, and the UN Security Council being vetoed and completely stopped from implementing its mandate by the US veto has been under discussion. But even that aside authorization intervention by the UN Security Council, the UN General Assembly is also entitled to take via resolutions and other ad hoc committees and ad hoc tribunals to take action, help stop and punish the genocide in Palestine. And ostensibly, that includes creating ad hoc tribunals, for example, that includes issuing warrants, for example, taking other actions as they can come up with creatively, but it also legitimizes um, even if not directly, but indirectly legitimizes independent state action to that effect if the UN Security Council blocks it or it doesn't happen in the UN General Assembly. And quite frankly, based on our meetings and discussions with other governments, we believe that there is strong interest in being able to do something meaningful and effective, building up and out from the ICJ decision. The other thing that I think is really important is the monitoring mechanism that would be implemented, that should be implemented by way of the ICJ decision on the provisional measures. And this means that the pattern of uh, stop to feed and kill again would really be brought to an end, because there has to be a monitoring and reporting for the duration of the ICG case, the merits part of the case. And I would imagine long after that, ensuring that genocide is not being perpetuated in Palestine by the Zionist entity, which is huge, right? This has we haven't seen this happen previously. This has been the holding pattern for 75 years for sure, but for 17 years during the life of the siege. And then another point that I think is glossed over a bit, and I really want to highlight, is the prevention. And the prevention means that you can't incite and you can't give material support to genocide. And this matter of incitement is really important. We've been able to well, this has happened in direct and large part because of the discursive war that's been launched against Palestinians for the past 75 years, that's dehumanized us, that's criminalized us for simply asking for our right to be free from subjugation, from massacres and apartheid. And in comes the South African government to say, well, this has got to end. And hopefully the ICJ will reiterate that in its findings, that this has got to end. And this is a tremendous, I think, game changer for how mainstream media, Western media, is mobilized and mobilizing violence, colonization, genocide, wars around Palestinians, but also brings in a layer of liability. And from our end, as attorneys preparing to really give life to this, and sometimes having to advise governments on how they can be prepared to give what happens legs, good or bad, right? Whether we get a decision which is unlikely, it's likely, or we don't get the decision, which I think is unlikely, that there are things that can be done quite effectively and tangibly to really make a mark and bring a stop to this genocide. And the question is how long it will take, and that largely depends on what the US will do in the Security Council after that decision is rendered.
It's all so important, and I'm so happy you raised all of that. And I wanted to ask, I think it's incredible. Nearly 1,000 civil society organizations declared their support for South Africa's efforts at the ICJ. Why was it so important to organize a broad civil society effort like that?
Yeah, so I have to say I'm very happy to be a part of, a member of, as the PAL Commission on War Crimes, of the International Coalition to Stop Genocide in Palestine. I was not the convener coalition, and they've done an amazing job. Um, it is through the pressure of civil society, and in the past few days in particular, as we've been escalating and kind of working to prepare hopefully state actors to kind of get their eggs in order to intervene eventually on this case. It's really been the bigger unions, the bigger elements of civil society in each of these countries that is making the fuss and the ruckus and amplifying their demands directly to their government, saying, we need you to issue this letter. And we've seen it happen, an almost immediate response, whether it was, a massive union or element of civil society signing and delivering petitions to their governments, and then getting letters, the next day, or our meetings letters the next day. And the letters are the preliminary notice that basically governments are giving to the ICJ. And this is something that we really wanted to underscore, is that these are not abstractions. These are not distant mechanisms. These are mechanisms intended to serve and protect the whole of humanity, and therefore the whole of humanity has a role to play in ensuring that these measures are taken, that these systems and institutions are protected for their own lives, for their own nations, for their own people. And I think when people also understand their power and that they have a role in this, it gives them a sense of, oh, okay, I have a tool and I have a direct role I can play, and they're watching this, and it's just been spiraling. So it's been magnificent to see that, and I give a great deal of gratitude to the coalition, who've really helped all of this along, and really directly helped our commission and our work along, vis-a-vis these governments. So yeah.
One of these issues, maybe it shouldn't be surprising that they did this, but the U.S., of course, has stated that the South African case is baseless. I think they also said it was without merit. Anthony Blinken said today that, amazingly, that it's actually blocking the efforts for peace. So, that's certainly the U.S. take on it. But I wonder what you think that says about the U.S. government, because they're so constantly moralizing around human rights. And then here we are with this, to me, very clear case. And it's one thing to be against it, but to call it baseless, meritless, I don't know. Anyway, let me leave it there.
Yeah, I mean, I was really excited and hoping you'd ask this question, Eugene. So we've been preparing these primers, my office and the PAL Commission, these primers and these drafts. I think, thank you for covering yesterday's short press conference on this. And one of the things I put as a sample, because the rest of the issues that would be in contention about and for which third states would intervene haven't been raised yet. So we used actually the example of the US's very own declaration of intervention on the ICJ case of Ukraine versus the Russian Federation, in which they take this very strong position in support of the application of the Genocide Convention in the case of Ukraine versus Russia. And, I think one of the most remarkable statements made today by the South African legal team was that this is a frighteningly unprecedented genocide that we're watching, and facts that really have not been seen in modern history, and quite frankly, before. The Zionists are doing the daily murder by upward of 70 Palestinians a day than the Nazis did. And so it really is frighteningly unprecedented. So it underscores not only the contradiction of the United States and its written filings on this issue, especially before the ICJ, but it really exposes the visceral racism that this country and the West has towards Palestinians, towards Arabs, towards Muslims, which we've seen over the course of the past 20 years, beginning with the invasion and the slaughter of Iraqis, but now coming to this really unfathomable level of violence. And it underscores their visceral investment in the Zionist entity, and their dedication to their role as imperialists, as violent, barbaric imperialists, their role in holding back human and moral progress. And I think this really would be one of the nails in the coffin of not only U.S. standing globally, but U.S. political and financial power in the world. So it's fine if they choose to shoot their own foot. Sometimes their arrogance works in our favor. It'll be a question of how that impacts the UN Security Council. I am hopeful that there will be measures taken to limit the US's ability to veto or to circumvent that. But yeah, that's my stance on those statements. It will be the U.S. that will be rendered meritless and baseless if they decide to intervene on papers on the side of Israel. Yeah,
Full circle.
I
Full
like
circle.
that
I love
response,
that.
Rania.
It also seems like there is this, historic element to this coming specifically from South Africa. I mean, a lot of this is so moving because of that. This is a country that has defeated apartheid, that also an apartheid government that was supported, I should say, by the US and the Israelis. Um, and that government had very strong ties to Israel. There's a whole history behind that. And now this country that liberated itself from this disgusting white supremacist apartheid government is the one that is taking on Israel. And I'm curious if you can offer some reflections on that very moving aspect of this.
I think that you stated it perfectly, Rania, which is it is so deeply moving. I mean, it's hair-raisingly beautiful. Um, and I think that's one of the important lessons in all of this, that it is oppressed people who are always on the front line because nobody understands oppression, whether it's physically, logically, even legally, or discursively, as oppressed people do and have in South Africa is, on top of having survived and defeated all this, South Africa is in struggle today. Right. And we are taking lessons from the South African government. The whole world is taking lessons from the South African government of what to do well and what to do better. We saw last night in Ramallah, in Nelson Mandela Square, Palestinians really rallying, and that was so touching and so moving. I think to us and to our South African colleagues and comrades whom we're in regular contact with. And I want to bring back a little bit about the role, if it's okay, Rania, about the role of oppressed people in this, and talk about the
Please.
alliance that we convened in Geneva, um, and our coordination with South African legal forces and organizing forces. One of the things that happened coming out of Geneva was the formation of the Global Legal Alliance for Palestine. And it's really this impressive convening of some of the heroes of the international lawyering world, but it's different in two primary ways. Number one, it goes beyond, which is something I've been advocating for since 2014, by the way, on the record at like high level meetings, which is, guys, we really have to go beyond international humanitarian laws and forums and really look at the commercial, look at the local, the regulatory, look at creating alternative, multi-state tribunals, and look at the commercial. So it's not just international humanitarian lawyers, but it's also international private lawyers. My practice is both those worlds, but we were able to bring in more and really look at also legislating. One line I like to say, and forgive me, I know there's going to be a lot of probably opinions on this, is they like sanctions, we like them too. They like terrorism, we like them too, right? So, we're moving in that direction. But then the other thing, to bring it back to South Africa, is this is the first global legal initiative, and I would say even respectfully domestic legal or national legal initiative that runs fully under the auspices of Palestinian self-determination, Palestinian-led. All of the demands, Palestinian popular will, coming into the legal domain in a way that we have never seen. And that's incredibly important and empowering, and really changes the flavor and the nature of legal actions, which have often happened for and on behalf of, and sometimes have problematic dicta, if not results. And so I think, taking this lesson of South Africa and really positioning Palestinians themselves, and not just the lawyers, but certainly the lawyers, but the researchers, the human rights workers, the survivors in Gaza, prioritizing them, is legally powerful, not just politically powerful.
Mm-hmm. Lamis Deek of Deek, Dictor, and Adi, as well as the Palestinian Assembly for Liberation Commission on War Crimes. Really, really was honored to have you here to help us sort through all of this, and we'll be looking forward to having you back as it continues to move forward.
It's my deepest honor to be with both of you and to see you. Eugene, I get to see you in New York, but I'm so excited to have been one-on-one with you, Rania, and I hope I get to see you soon. Thank you both for all of your work.
Right on. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Take care, guys.